Let's talk now to Nick Freeman, who's a motoring lawyer known as Mr. Loophole. Nick, welcome back to the Wake Up Call.
Good morning, Hannah.
We've been talking about the stats this morning, as you heard. Is this a problem that's getting worse then?
I think it's definitely getting worse. I think people have no regard really to the dangers of drug driving in particular. That's because there's an increased use, whether it's been during lockdown, during COVID, and whether it's combined with a lack of police on the streets. I mean, we talk about a police campaign over Christmas and the New Year, and maybe over a couple of weeks in the summer. In my view, first of all, there needs to be a massive police presence all the time on the roads, so that these people who are risking lives are brought to account, and largely they're not. I mean, anecdotally, a person came around to do some work. He said he was going to watch a football match with 20 of his mates. He said they will all be taking drugs, all be driving home. And not the slightest regard, one, for the dangers that poses, or two, for the possibility of getting caught, and none of them were caught. So, the police, there's no point just doing it over Christmas. I mean, there are other problems as well. There needs to be far more education. People are ignorant in terms of the effects of drugs and driving. That they're aware, of course, of the social stigma attached to drink driving, but not drugs, because it's largely untouched. We don't hear about it. And it's ironic, isn't it, to hear that, we're talking about rolling out a course. We have a drink rehabilitation course. So if you are convicted of drink driving, you get a 25% discount off your sentence, nothing to do with insurance premiums, which obviously is attractive, but it's also didactic. It helps educate people in terms of whether they're tempted to do it again. And I've always been astonished as to why there hasn't been a similar course in relation to drug driving. Of course, now there is.
Yes, indeed.
The sentences have also been revised. Sorry, Anna, just for your listeners' benefits. The tragic accident you talked about was in 2021. From the 28th of June 2022, people who cause fatal accidents are now liable to get a life sentence. The maximum before that date was, in fact, 14 years. So that it's a huge problem. It's growing exponentially, and there are various measures that could be put in place to tackle it.
Such as what?
Well, I would have, as part of the driving test, I would have video evidence. I would have reports from victims, reports from the police, so that this is all an integral part of the driving test, so that people are informed before they're able to legally drive that the potential dangers of drink and drug driving, because it's not really touched. And people need to be aware of it. Yeah. Obviously, at school, that's a very important thing. But the kernel of the matter is, at the time they're going to be legitimately allowed on the road, and during the test, that should be in part of the test. And if they fail on that part, then of course that's good. They need to know. And we need a government campaign like we used to have for seatbelts, clunk, click every trip, so that there is this constant message being conveyed. We've successfully, I think, attached a social stigma to drink driving, although I believe statistically those figures are now on the increase. Because ultimately, whatever we do, if you take number plates off cars, people are going to commit offences. If you don't have police to detect people, or you're just relying on robotical policing, and most drivers feel it's robotical. I might get a flash, but most of the criminality attached with my driving is not going to be detected, just one small aspect. So that's one serious aspect that I think would help massively. I think the courts now have teeth. I think the sentencing will bite. Obviously, I heard one of your previous contributors say, people who take drugs are addicts. If they are addicts, of course, they should be reporting that addiction to DVLA, and they won't be driving. I don't agree most of them are addicts. I think they take drugs for recreational purposes, as they do with drink. And now the symptoms, it's harder to deal with drugs. And I think that one of the huge problems with drugs is, because the drugs themselves, like cocaine, is illegal, if you literally have a trace in your body, you are going to commit an offence and you're going to be disqualified. And depending upon the consequences, far worse can happen. Whereas with drink, it relates really to impairment. So you have to have a significant amount of alcohol in your system before you're convicted. And in my view, that's a problem that needs to be tackled, because the current level, it's the highest in Western Europe. It's the highest of any EU country. I know we're not part of it now. It needs to be reduced to 50 as a maximum. It's too high. At the current level, you're 4 times more likely to have an accident. So that needs to be reduced. That will help make our roads safer.
Yeah.
So I think there's a whole host of things that must be done as a matter of urgency to deal with this problem, which is getting worse and worse.
It's well said. That was very comprehensive. Listen, Nick, thank you so much for your time and your expertise this morning. Great to have you on the show. Just remains for us to wish you a Merry Christmas and ask you what we've been asking people this morning, which is, what's the one thing you can't do without on Christmas Day?
My dog.
Oh, that's lovely. That's one of the nicest answers. Well, listen, you and your dog then have a lovely Christmas. We'll talk to you again.
Cheers, Anna.
In the
Thanks
new
very
year.
much. Bye.
Take care. Nick Freeman then, motoring lawyer known as Mr. Loophole. We covered a lot of ground.